Matt Hestad of the Georgia Forestry Association discusses current trends, economic drivers, and challenges in the forest and lumber markets in Georgia. We hope you enjoy.
In Our Expert Opinion podcast is brought to you by SVN Saunders Ralston Danzler Real Estate, a full-service land and commercial brokerage with over $4 billion in transactions since 1996.
Welcome back to Our Expert Opinion podcast. We have a virtual podcast today, which is always, it's leaps and bounds to get there, to get it set up. But eventually
we do it.
Eventually Eli gets it done.
Thank you. I try my hardest.
Usually with very little assistance. So I have my co-host here today, Chad. And then we have a very fun and special guest all the way from, where are you located in Georgia?
I'm in Covington, Georgia, so just east of Atlanta, about an hour east of Atlanta on I-20.
Okay. Well, we've got Matt joining us today with the Georgia Forestry Association. And I believe you attended our annual, well, what's going to be an annual conference.
No, he didn't attend. He spoke.
You spoke at our conference.
Speaker.
That was an awesome conference. I think you guys did a great job of bringing together a diverse group of speakers, and the topics covered were, super informative, and we appreciate the opportunity to attend. We're never shy of things to talk about in the forestry landscape, and so it was a great opportunity to get out and see some familiar faces, but also see some people that we maybe haven't met before. So thank you for that, and thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely.
Of course. No, we're excited. As I told you yesterday when we spoke for a little bit, I really don't have much knowledge on forestry. What knowledge I do have is actually directly from this podcast.
From here.
Because we've had some, property managers come in, or some agents who are in timber and
Land management, property management, yeah. All of it.
So I'm excited to learn more today. So really, I would like for you to kind of give an overview of what it is that the association does, and kind of your role in forestry generally.
So I appreciate that. And, the Georgia Forestry Association has been around since 1907. We're one of the oldest forestry conservation organizations in the United States. Back when we were founded in 1907, the population dynamics in Georgia were much different than they are today. Most people lived in rural areas of the state. And so what you had was, approximately 80 to 90% of the population living in rural areas, working the land, owning land, managing timber, and being kind of directly involved in their properties every single day. And then the rest of people lived in urban areas of the state. And so back in 1907, the kind of mission of the Georgia Forestry Association was really around ensuring that landowners had resources to manage their land, that they had expert advice, but not only that they had one voice that spoke for the entire forestry supply chain. And today, it's not much different, but our population dynamics have changed tremendously. We're in a position today where 70%, 75% of the state, over 3/4 of the state lives in an urban or suburban area that's defined by the U.S. Census. And so those people are one step removed from forestry. They're removed from the land, and probably the most applicable example they have of a forest is what they see in their backyard. So behind me, this is an urban tree, right? And so those are the things, that's the perspective that they have of forestry. Or if they're headed down south to Florida on vacation, they're passing forests on both sides of the road. And so it gets kind of fuzzy. I think Georgians think of forests, as kind of natural gifts, maybe kind of things like the sun or the clouds or water or things along those lines. But here in Georgia, it is a very intentional ecosystem. So our state has about 24 million acres of forests across the state. That covers just shy of 2/3 of the land area in the state. So what we like to say is 2 out of every 3 raindrops in the state fall on a forest. Of those forest lands, 90% is privately owned. And so that's much different than, say, the West Coast, where the West Coast is going to be about 65% publicly owned. Those will be federal, national forest lands or state-owned lands. And so here in the state, private land ownership is it's interwoven in our ability to conserve land, to provide clean air, clean water, wildlife habitat, recreation, beauty that everybody enjoys. But not only that, the products that we need really to sustain our entire life. We've had a tremendous amount of leadership in Georgia over the last 100 years that has positioned the state as really a globally recognized leader in forestry. Georgia, by many accounts, is the #1 forestry state in the nation. No offense to my friends in Florida. I know you guys are located in Florida. But we have, we're number one in privately owned timberland, right at 22 million acres of timberland. We've got, we're #1 in forest product exports, leading in about 21 different forest product export categories, and then leading in overall trade value of forest product exports as well. We also harvest more timber than any other state in the nation. And in fact, if you compile all of the northeastern states together, and I know that's not saying much because they're heavily populated, but if you compile all of those together and looked at their harvest volume, they don't even come close to the amount of timberland that we harvest annually. Because of those harvesting of those acres, we're also the #1 state for growing and planting trees. So many of the premier seedling growers are located here in the state. So we're not only planting trees here that have been grown in a nursery here, but we're exporting those trees, seedlings to other states as well. And so Georgia plants between 225 to 300 million seedlings each year, and we're definitely a nationwide leader from that perspective. So it's a humble opportunity for us here, a humbling opportunity for us here at the association to have the opportunity to tell that story, whether that's to an elected official at the local, state, or federal level, whether that's to a K-12 educator or person who's focused on education, or whether that's to business leaders across the state. So we're primarily kind of the forestry sector's outsourced communication arm, if you will. So yeah.
Yeah, well, okay.
Little bit to unpack
a lot
there.
of things.
Yeah.
But the first one is, it seems like forestry is a major economic impact or like driver in Georgia. And so how does that, translate into like jobs and the state of Georgia, their economy as a whole?
So this Georgia Tech does an annual study of our forestry economy here in the state. And one of the things that they look at is overall economic impact. So they'll take kind of direct economic impact from sales and marketing of timber, and also sales and marketing of final products. And then they'll add in the indirect impacts as well. So thinking about the one gas station that's outside of a forest product mill, it wouldn't exist if the forest product mill was not there. And so our entire forest industry adds about $41 billion of economic impact annually to the state. And it comprises about 140,000 jobs. We have approximately 200 primary wood using facilities across the state. Those are mills that produce a pulp and paper product, which is using small diameter trees and taking that process through, taking that tree through a process where they chip it up and then remove the cellulose from the wood fiber, and then that goes into paper products, cardboard, liner board for your drink casings, and your cardboard boxes, your Amazon box that you get every day. Or if you're like my wife, we get one at my house nearly every day.
Yeah.
And then all the way through to sawmills, energy facilities, and other products, really that consumers need every single day to survive. If you look at where all the forest product mills are located, there's approximately 80 counties in the state. We have 156 counties in Georgia. There's 83 of those counties that have at least one forest product manufacturing facility, and many of them have multiple facilities. And so those manufacturing facilities kind of serve as hubs, economic hubs, where an entire system is supporting that mill, from the loggers who are harvesting the products and taking them to the mill on trucks, to the landowners who are investing and managing that land through the life of the forest, to an entire support network of people, from local foresters to real estate experts, and all sorts of people who are kind of in that professional services category. So it's definitely a big industry here in Georgia, and kind of the backbone, if you will, of rural Georgia.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of commerce. So I just wonder, is there anything that's like detrimental to the forestry sector, or are there like major challenges right now, or is everything's good?
Bottlenecks.
Yeah.
There's always bottlenecks. We look really hard at the competitiveness of the forestry sector across the state, how we compare to other states in the nation, how we're growing markets for forest products. And so one of the concerning things that's happening right now is across probably the last 18 months, we've seen several mill closures around the state. Florida's had two major mill closures that have been just over the border. And so the impact of those mill closures is incredible. And it impacts families, people who are displaced from jobs. But not only that, it impacts the entire forestry economy, from the landowners who are counting on those mills to sell their product when it came to maturation, to the loggers who are out there investing in equipment and human resources to get those trees to the mill. And so it's kind of a convergence of a number of things. Our forestry economy, in a lot of ways, is the tip of the spear when it comes to the impacts of inflation on our economy. So cost increases when you look at the cost of labor, the cost of fuel, the cost of maintaining facilities and upgrading facilities. Our economy, our forestry economy, is in many ways the folks that experience that the most, the quickest. And it has to do with the capital intensive nature of this business. It's very expensive to run a mill and keep that mill up. Also, from a logging perspective, logging equipment has changed over time, and it's become highly productive pieces of equipment that have air conditioning and XM radio and things like that. But not only that, just very high performance equipment, and that costs in a range of $300,000 to $400,000 per piece of equipment. So when you see incremental inflationary impact on that sector, it really affects the entire system. And so that's something that we're monitoring here in Georgia. One of the things that we're looking at in trying to help our sector frame up the ways in which the forestry sector can impact the future needs of our economy, whether that's sustainable aviation fuel, batteries made from wood, things like bioplastics, where we're looking at basically making all the plastic things that we use in our life out of wood instead of oil-based materials, petroleum-based materials. And so that is one huge challenge right now. And we're, I think in Georgia, we've been very lucky not to see a major mill closure. We had one in Brunswick that closed really due to a fire that happened. And then the mill ownership decided not to invest in opening that facility back up. But we're very concerned about that long term.
Yeah, I was going to ask why maybe the two, I mean, I don't know if you would know, but why the two in Florida closed?
So if you looked at both of those mills, and a lot of pulp and paper facilities are facilities that were built in the like 1940s, 50s, and 60s. So they've been around for a long time, and many of them were originally built to produce a different product. In I think one of the cases, the mill was actually built originally to produce newsprint. And over time, they have shifted the manufacturing in that mill to meet demand for other products that are of higher demand, like linerboard and material that goes into cardboard boxes, for example. Those mills, I think at the time, the ownership was looking at a real need to invest a lot of money to upgrade those facilities, and ultimately chose, due to economic inflation or inflationary pressures, and a whole host of different factors, chose not to invest in those facilities, and rather chose to pour their capital into other facilities that were maybe more ready to take on a higher performance. So it's a complicated thing. A lot of different factors go into it.
You can't really blame them for not, wanting to spend millions of dollars to like upgrade and, I guess find a different path. But, yesterday we had talked a little bit about maybe some like inflation and talking about just the lumber prices. And, during kind of like the boom of COVID, there were so many new homes being built or being
DIY projects, all that.
And so there was, I believe, a shortage of lumber here. And it was causing, major issues just getting any home projects or home building finished. And so I was just wondering, what insight you have, or maybe, what caused that, or if that's still going on.
Yeah. So once again, a highly complicated situation, right? So we'll rewind the clock and put ourselves begrudgingly back in the shoes of our former selves in March of 2020.
I'm actually okay with that because I was home. I was like really content. But anyways, go ahead.
A lot of people were, and
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways it may have been good for us to take a break along those lines. But if you think about the forest economy prior to that point, a lot of e-commerce and common, I guess, paper goods that people use were doing pretty well. So the pulp and paper market has been doing well for really, I would say about 5 to 6 years prior to COVID. The lumber market, however, has been and continues to be very strained from a lack of housing. We've been hoping that we're gonna get to 1.5 million housing starts for a while now. Actually, when I first started in this job back in 2011, we were talking about getting to 1.5 million housing starts then. We're still not there.
What is that?
Started
homes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the lumber sector is highly dependent on housing for its health. It's kind of the primary economic driver right now, and it's not only single family homes, but multifamily homes, apartment buildings, office buildings, et cetera. And so when leading up to COVID, a lot of mills across the state had actually curtailed production, meaning instead of running 3 shifts, they were already kind of pared back to maybe where they were only running 1 or maybe 2 shifts, or maybe they were running 1 shift and then hustling to meet demand when they needed to with 2 shifts. That's just an economic factor. They were doing what they could to manage the cost of running that mill during a time of low demand, if you will. So that was the situation leading up to COVID. And then COVID happened, and I don't think any employer really expected how they were going to have to deal with that. So let's say you're only running 1 shift, and then somebody comes into work and they say that they're sick. Well, in the beginning, that was kind of like, let's shut down the entire shift, get some sanitation going on, maybe interview the employees and figure out who shook hands with that employee before the shift started, so on and so forth. So these employers, in an effort to keep people safe at work, were admittedly not as productive as they could have been. Then you layer on the fact that many large lumber buyers in the state could sense that there was going to be a shortage of lumber. And so do you guys remember another forest product that maybe we had a hard time buying?
I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it.
Some TP.
Yeah, because I was the one at Costco in line, like 30th in line with my best friend waiting. So I'll never forget that.
So the same issue that happened with every consumer going to the grocery store and buying up as much toilet paper as they could happened in the lumber sector with kind of major lumber buyers. They went into the market and said, how much can I buy today? And I want to get my hands on it as quick as possible. And so you have this compounding situation, mills not being as productive as they could be, people going out and buying all the available stock. And then You, me, everybody else, we started being more and more present in our homes, and we're thinking, man, I really don't like my house. I don't like my basement. I've been waiting for 10 years to finish out this basement or this deck off my back porch, and so I'm going to take that opportunity to go do that now. So then the home improvement market layered on top of everything going on, and so people were going out to Lowe's and Home Depot and buying, pickup truckloads of wood to take back home and do their own home improvement projects. And then contractors, everyone was coming online and buying that wood at the same time. And meanwhile, we're still going through this issue of not being able to run those mills at full capacity. And so the issue was simply a supply and demand issue. Demand really, really high, supply really, really low, and production was just not there immediately to meet demand. So what happened to price? It went through the roof. And a lot of people, and I know we had a lot of landowner members who called us during that period of time and said, what's going on here? There's got to be some sort of funny business going on here. And at the end of the day, it really just comes down to the fact that there was not enough production to meet demand.
Has the lumber industry caught back up since then? Because I haven't really heard too many complaints about it now, but I also don't pay attention. So.
Well, didn't you say they bought a lot of futures at that time as well?
They did. And so the sector, along with the rest of the economy, has kind of worked through that labor challenge that we had immediately during COVID and then right after COVID. It's still not easy to keep people employed, even though a lot of forest product manufacturers go through extreme lengths to keep people employed, through bonus structures and performance-based structures. It's still a tough job, and so people sometimes have a hard time committing to that long term. And so when you think about production, over time, we've been able to catch up from a production standpoint, and then demand has fallen off too. We've worked our way through those initial how the home improvement bust, I think all the stimulus checks that everybody got, and then spin it into their finishing out their basement or working on their backyard, building fences and things along those lines. They've worked through that uptick in demand, and then also the housing economy more generally has remained flat. I'm sure you guys could probably talk about housing demand probably better than I could, but the housing demand has remained relatively flat with interest rates being high, and so that's caused the lumber demand and lumber prices therefore to kind of level off as well.
So during that time, did the landowner, the timber landowner, get that money in their pocket? Did they see that demand go way up?
So it's a function of location in many instances, but overall, you think about those two supply and demand graphs as completely different. They're not connected, right? On the timberland side, Georgia is actually oversupplied with timber right now. We had a lot of great federal programs that came along in the 80s to support farmers in planting trees. So cost share programs where farmers who wanted to get out of the farming business were paid to put trees in the ground. And to a degree, that's a good thing for our environment. But to a large degree, it made the forestry economy a little bit different in Georgia. If you compare where a landowner was at in the early 90s to today, the prospect of growing trees to that full maturation, 30, 40 years, just for the timberland income is pretty bleak. You're not going to get close to the amount of money that you were making back in the early 90s. And it simply has to do with the fact that we're oversupplied from a timber perspective. A lot of economists actually call it the wall of wood. And there's been a lot of literature written on the planting that went on in the early to late 80s, all of that wood coming onto the market at the same time, and then ultimately being in the situation where we're at today, where we're growing 50% more than we harvest annually, which sounds like a great thing from an environmental perspective, but a good analogy that my boss Andres Villegas uses is that if you walked into a barber shop, got a haircut, and then walked out of the barber shop with 50% more hair than you walked in there with, it wouldn't be too long before you'd say, I've got a problem on my hands, right? And so that's kind of where we're at. So to answer your question, though, in short, landowners did not, I think, experience that immediate uptick in the prices that they were getting for their timber. What I will say has impacted the prices of timber more has been how much rain we've gotten in the last probably 3 to 5 years. There's we don't typically log on tracks that are really wet tracks for best management practices. We like to shift around when tracks get real wet. We don't want to rut those up or impact soil quality to a large degree. And so folks who had high dry tracks during this period of really wet weather over the last 3 years, those guys have been able to market their timber, I think, in a different way, and they're getting prices that kind of look kind of like the early 90s. So if you've got a dry track, you're kind of king of the castle there.
So how does the Georgia Forestry Association kind of play into all of this? You have the landowners with the timber on it. You've got the mills, which, by the way, Chad's last name is Mills. So how many times during this podcast have you been like, those are my people?
It's rang in my ear quite a few times.
I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, where do you guys come in and what is it that you guys are doing with all of these people involved in the forestry industry?
So we're offered really like I mentioned in the beginning, the opportunity to speak on behalf of the entire supply chain. And there's not a lot of organizations that are like that. There's several national organizations that maybe represent landowners only, or represent large landowners only, or they represent the manufacturing sector only, or the logging sector only. At GFA, we are truthfully the voice for the entire supply chain. So everybody who's involved in forestry. So what that means is the issues that we take up are issues that benefit really the entire supply chain. We work on we've had the same core principles today as we had in 1907. They're just maybe articulated a little bit differently, but we have 3 core principles: private property rights, sensible taxes and regulation, and healthy markets. And so we try to fit our work into those 3 areas. And if it doesn't fit within those 3 areas, we really more than likely choose not to work on it. Outside of that, so that's from an advocacy perspective, those are the types of issues that we're working on. protecting private property rights, working with elected officials to ensure that our tax system is fair for forest land, and that it recognizes the long-term investment nature of owning and managing timberland. Making sure that our regulatory system is taking into account science, not emotions, when we're putting regulations forward that impact our forested landscape. And then finally, looking at maintaining the economic impact that exists through the markets that currently exist, our pulp and paper markets, our poles, pole markets, our saw log markets, as well as engineered products like plywood and mass timber. But not only that, really thinking into the future and looking at research and maybe economic barriers that might open up, might give us the opportunity to open up new markets for forestry. So that's what we do on the advocacy side. We have about 2,000 members across the state, ranging from our smallest landowner member has a 25-acre tract in Athens, Georgia. And our largest landowner member owns around 400,000 acres in the state. So there's a full range of landowner members. We have loggers that are really one crew. And they may have a total of 5 employees to timber buyers who have, as many as 30 crews and trucks and an entire infrastructure to support those crews. And then we have mills that represent small family small family sawmills, all the way up to publicly traded companies who are looking at several assets across the state. And so it gives us the opportunity really to bring that entire sector together. We have maybe 30 events across the year where we get our members together in regions across the state. We have Forestry Day at the Capitol, which is a great event. I'd recommend you all attending that in February of next year. It's where our sector really gets together and communicates with elected officials while they're in session in Atlanta. And then we have an annual conference that really has become one of the largest gatherings of the entire forestry supply chain in the nation. Last year, we had about 800 attendees at that event, and it's continuing to grow over time. And so I think SVN is going to be heavily involved in this year's conference, and that sense of community that you gain from being around like-minded people, being around people who you do business with or maybe have the opportunity to do business with is a great opportunity. So we don't take that opportunity lightly, given people that sense of community and that sense of purpose within the forestry community. And so that's another important aspect. And then finally, we have a 501c3 foundation, the Georgia Forestry Foundation, that really focuses on education, K through 12 education. As a matter of fact, I guess it was two weeks ago, we had a live forestry exploration with Georgia Public Broadcasting, where we had about 40,000 people tuned in. Most of those were kids who were in classrooms and actually partaking in the live exploration as a part of their curriculum. But 40,000 people who really got to see the forestry supply chain from the land all the way up to manufacturing. And so our foundation is an important part of looking into the future and making sure that we're educating people on the benefits of forestry. But not only that, looking at issues that are going to impact us 50 to 100 years into the future, and conducting research, working with business leaders across the state to open up markets and think about market-based solutions for the forestry economy. So that's another big body of work for our association. So that's kind of how we're structured. I'm sorry that was a little long-winded.
No. Actually, one of the last things you said ties into one of the last questions I want to ask, and that is, what your predictions are for the next 10 years in the lumber sector, and what do you think is going to be driving that?
So I appreciate the opportunity to
forestry or lumber.
Chad, let me live, man.
Well, I can talk about both of those things. And so broadly, I think what we're seeing across the U.S. is what one of my friends who works for the National Alliance of Forest Owners, Kate Gatto, she deemed it as the Green New Rush. And so you have companies, organizations, shareholders who are all pushing for reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, and pushing companies to become more and more sustainable with their operations. And so think about, all your car manufacturers who are saying, hey, by 2050, we're going to go 100% electric. I'm sure a few of those are walking those claims back now. But airlines who are talking about being at net zero by 2050. A lot of our energy companies talking about reducing emissions and focusing more and more on renewable energy. So when you think about all of that, the forestry sector really has a huge opportunity that we can play in this green new rush. Okay, so there's two ways that you draw down emissions. Number one, you can focus on your operations, so emissions from your operations, and that's just the lights in your building, the energy that you're using in the facility to manufacture products or put people on planes or whatever. And then you can buy carbon credits. The forestry community has an opportunity to play in both of those sectors, but the one that I think excites GFA the most is the opportunity to support companies in drawing down their operational carbon, right? So if you look at Delta, for example, there's only a few ways that they can draw down the emissions that it takes to move as many people as they do back and forth across the country and across the world. And one of those is jet fuel. Scientists for a long time have been focusing on making sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, as we call it. SAF has a number of different feedstocks that can go into that material, from corn and soybeans that are converted into ethanol and then converted into SAF. But actually woody biomass, or the wood fiber that comes from trees, can also be used in that process. And we think Georgia is uniquely positioned with Delta here in the state, and the largest airport, one of the largest airports in the world in Atlanta, to be a leader in the manufacturing of sustainable aviation fuel from woody biomass. And that's just an incredible opportunity for the state, and I think for our growers to think about the use of the products that they're creating every day, and really revolutionizing transportation in our country.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what wood fibers are, but sounds important. So I would say you guys have a lot going on in the next decade.
That's right. And then from the lumber perspective, Chad, one of the things, and I'll pull a little prop here. One of the things that we're really excited about, and we've been working on for the last really 5 years, is mass timber. And so you can see mass timber is an engineered wood product, and you can see here the different layers here. So this is dimensional lumber that is pressed. A layer is put down, another layer comes in with a layer of glue, and then you swap directions perpendicularly, and you can do that up to 5 times to get to a pretty big size. But when this goes through the process of pressing that timber together, the wood actually chemically bonds to itself, and this is stronger or as strong as steel and concrete. And so what that does is it really unlocks the ability for us to build tall wood buildings. So replacing steel and concrete with this mass timber product. We have been supportive of a project. I don't know if you've been to Ponce City Market in the last few years, but it's a really renowned food hall in Atlanta, and retail food office space where they took an old Sears and Roebuck warehouse and converted it into this really adaptive reuse, really dynamic and beautiful building. And it's actually one of the highest leases in the state is right there on the Beltline in Atlanta.
Oddly, I have been there, and it is a really cool place.
Yeah, I haven't been 6-7 years. So
it's fun.
It's a neat building, and they are owned. Ponce City Market is owned by a company called Jamestown. Jamestown owns a lot of really famous real estate locations across the U.S. So Ponce City Market is one, but they also own One Times Square, for example, where they dropped the ball for New Year's.
Yeah.
But they are also involved in timberland investments. So they own their own timberland as well. And we've been really engaged with their timberland guys for the last 5 years. A leader over there by the name of Troy Harris, who is actually one of our board of directors, a member of our board of directors, and a really a kind of visionary when it comes to mass timber. Troy started working with us about 3 years ago to help educate Jamestown's leaders on the prospect of building a mass timber building, but not only that, sourcing the timber directly from their land in West Georgia. And we've been really honored to be a part of that process. And they actually just did the ribbon cutting on that event, on that building 3 weeks ago, earlier this month. And so it's just been an awesome opportunity to see that building come to fruition. It's the first Georgia-grown mass timber building in the state. They harvested that wood from Jamestown land in West Georgia. It went to Georgia Pacific in Albany, Georgia, where it was manufactured into lumber. It then went across the line into Alabama to Smartlam, which is the only manufacturer of mass timber in the U.S. South at this time. And then it went back to Atlanta. It was about a 600-mile supply chain that it took to build that building. And so very, very exciting opportunity. We published a documentary about that. It's a mini documentary, and you can watch that at seedlingstosolutions.org. And then we also built a mass timber art exhibit in the courtyard of Ponce City Market called the Taurus Arch. And I would recommend you guys go check that out the next time you're there. And then, of course, if you like shopping at Pottery Barn, Pottery Barn is the primary tenant there for 619 Ponce. And so I would definitely recommend you check that out.
Very nice.
Okay.
I still have so many questions, but not the time.
I know. Well, we really appreciate you coming on today. That was very informative. And like I said, most of the information that I get about a lot of things comes from this podcast. So now I get to at least pretend like I know what I'm talking about if somebody brings up forestry or lumber. So I really appreciate that.
And then if you can't answer the question, you just say, I know a guy.
Yeah, I'll send them right to you.
Well, thank you guys. It was fun to be on here today, and I always enjoy talking about our forestry sector, the number one forestry state in the nation, and something that I think your listeners will be interested in is that forestry investments. I'm going to continue to be bullish on forestry and forest land as an investment, and so. Just know that our Forestry Association is here to support your network, and we look forward to you all reaching out if you have any questions or any needs. We're happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt.
We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one.